Welcome to Chasing the Beats, a show dedicated to weeklybeats.com artists, their songs, and stories from the 2024 season. I'm your host, SQF, and our guest today is Kedbreak136. Welcome, Ked. I'll call you Ked today. Welcome to the show.
Hey, SQF. Good to be here.
Yeah, man. So I spent a bunch of time digging into your tracks, even more than the ones that I had already commented on. And I think if I were to sum up your musical style, it would be cinematic arpeggio master.
I would have used the word ADHD, but yeah.
That's the means to get there, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I think, cinematic arpeggios, yeah, definitely. But it really depends on the track, right? If you
Oh,
listen to,
yeah.
I'm trying to be all over the place. It's
Yeah.
intentional.
Yeah. Well, the biggest first question I had, or a fact kind of to bring up about you, is that going through your tracks, I came across, I think it's called Bumblebee,
Yeah.
where you mention that you've been doing a track a week since like April of 2020.
February of 2020. Yeah.
February of 2020.
Right. Yeah,
Are you still doing a track a
I
week?
am. I have to do a track today, actually. I haven't started, so I have to get
Oh my
to work on it at some point.
God.
Yeah,
Dude,
I've been past
that
250 weeks in a row.
wow, talk about a streak. I thought I was like big time for 52-week streak, but holy wow.
No, it's interesting. It started February 2000, and it was before COVID, right? Like COVID hadn't really hit, and
Until like March-ish or
yeah,
April.
right. Yeah, I consider COVID really started hitting in March, and I was working in an office in Tokyo. I don't know if you remember those whole days where we actually to actually go to an office to work.
Oh yeah, I remember those old times.
and and there was one of my colleagues, a good friend of mine, is called Henty, and he said, "Hey, I'm on this thing. It's a community where you make music every week." And I thought, wow, that's really cool because I've been making music for 25 years, but I always struggle to finish a single track. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking maybe I should give it a try. So I started from his introduction. I started getting into it and never stopped.
That's amazing. What
Yeah.
ha, did you start with weekly beats for your first year in 2020?
Yeah, that was directly
Okay.
in Weekly Beats. So I was in Weekly Beats 2020, started, I think, a week 8 or something like that.
And what do you do in the off season? Like, where do you post your music? Do you have a community still?
There is a small community on, I think it's a site called Streak.
Okay,
And
I saw that
so,
on the Discord.
yeah, and there's like 5, 10 people.
Okay.
Some of them are from Weekly Beats, like Vim. There's 10. Like, I said 250, it sounds good, but 10, I think, is at 600 weeks in a row.
Woo! All right.
And some of those people, they go hard.
Yeah.
It's a way of life, right? Like, and for me,
Yeah.
that's really the approach. For me, it's not about I want to make 52 weeks in a row. It's for me,
Yeah.
it's now I want to dedicate in my life the time to spend time on just making music because I think that's important for my mental health and
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
balance of life. So yeah, it's like some people go out and run, and what I do is I do music.
Yeah. And you kind of touched a little bit on kind of some of the experience that I had when you spoke about starting in 2020 on that Bumblebee track, that it's almost kind of like a journal for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a way of some tracks. So it's gonna really depend on the track. When you go back and listen to some tracks, sometimes I have no memory of making those tracks. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but other tracks will take you back. Like, oh yeah, I remember thinking about this track. I remember about this melody. I
Yeah.
remember walking around listening to it and thinking, oh, I need to do something about it. So I like that. And I like also the fact that it's not just the music itself, but it's also the mood that comes with it. Like
Yeah.
sometimes you have that hectic feel of the track, which was reflecting actually like mental stress or an hectic life, I
Yeah.
would say, and some other times that are more, relaxed. And I think super interesting to have that experience. Also, like my dad passed away 1 year and a half ago,
Oh
and
man.
on that week, I had to make a track, and I did a recording of that, and for me it was very important, that recording. The track doesn't sound like anything really; it's just one
Yeah.
minute of silence of me basically recording the sound in the street. But that's
Yeah.
super important, and that's part of the journal, right? It's a way of expressing yourself. Like, I don't open and write something down, but I
Yeah.
record something that will in some way try to echo whatever I feel during this week. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
I
I
think that's
think
really cool.
music has this unique ability to transport us back in time more than any other thing. Like, I've talked about this in other episodes where you sometimes remember the first time you heard a certain song, but when you're actually making the song and maybe working on it for multiple days in a row, like, it really marks that point in time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So, and also it's Rick Rubin on his book. I think he did a book about the creative way or something like that,
Yeah, I
right?
love that book.
And he talks about that, about considering making a track like writing a journal. And what I like about this approach is also, like, when you write a journal, you don't write it for other people. You just write it
No.
for yourself. You don't have to judge. Hey, was that a good entry? Did I write a good entry
Yeah.
for my Tuesday? You don't really care. You just do. You just do
What if
whatever.
someone reads this? What will they think?
Was my prose good?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one thing that I definitely learned in my first year of doing this is, making music at first was sort of like what are other people going to think of it? And then it really just became like, this is something that's fun to do. I push it off the cliff on Sunday and then I move on to the next one. And I don't really have the time to dwell on like who really likes it. But there's just so much variety just on weekly beats. It's like there's a track for everyone to like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that that makes it easier also to make new tracks. And I think that's a good thing of weekly beats, the fact that you have to do those 52 beats, is that, especially at the beginning, you'll try to do every track, you will try to spend time and make it interesting and everything. At some point, you will break.
Yeah.
You will do some kind of speed trash thing. And you know what?
Yeah.
After you've submitted the track that sounds terribly bad without any idea, you'll feel okay because you'll realize, hey, I did it again.
Yeah,
It's
I did it.
okay. It's
I did
okay
it.
to have bad tracks. A track is a track. So just go for it.
And then inevitably there'll be someone that comments on it that's like, "Oh my god, this is one of my favorites of yours."
Yeah, sometimes it's weird. Sometimes you're like, really?
Yeah.
Really? You like that?
Yeah.
Like, I just stumbled on my piano. That's really what I recorded.
I mean, it really just goes to show there's something for everyone and just how, like, even if you don't like it, someone else might.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, I think that's very true. And you can't control it, right? When you see that you cannot control it, then in a way it's refreshing. Just let go, right? Just do whatever
Yeah.
you enjoy. If anybody else enjoys it, great for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what was your music experience prior to 2020? Like you said, you hadn't really finished a track, but I know just from listening to your stuff, you were in some punk bands. I definitely know you know how to play guitar.
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing music for 30 years at least. And back in France, as you can notice from my accent, I'm French. Um, I was playing in punk bands. I was playing guitar. Sometimes I was singer in some bands. And then I moved to Japan 20 years ago, and then I played in a lot of bands in Japan from usually guitar, actually, guitar or bass, in punk
Yeah,
bands or electro rock bands, or that kind of stuff. So that was my background. We'd play actually a lot of grunge thing and a lot of original composition, like jam, improvised, playing in some kind of weird band where we would play like, I don't know what you call that, ethnic fusion jazz kind of weird stuff.
yeah, yeah,
So trying to to play with a lot of people, and that's what I was doing. So I recorded a few, like amateur albums, right? We never put them on a record company or anything, but it's always hard to record it, especially when you put time. I don't know if you've been in bands, but when you play in a band and you create a song, you end up, I guess it depends on the band, but we ended up like rehearsing those kinds of tracks every week and week and week and week, and
Yeah.
you invest so much energy and attachment to that track that it becomes very hard to record because
Yeah.
it's always never exactly the thing that you wanted to do.
Yeah.
So if you have 1 year of rehearsals and you try to record a track, you feel so much pressure. And I feel
Yeah.
so different from Weekly Beats where, like, anyway, I didn't know this track until this morning. So I don't feel
Exactly.
any
Yeah.
pressure or attachment
Yeah.
to it or recording it. So I think that's been very liberating. So
Yeah,
coming from,
you're not trying to capture, 50 different times you perform this song into like a thing that will live on that does those performances justice.
yeah, it's so hard and so stressful. And you have to also accommodate to everybody in the band, right? Like to make sure that the drummer's happy, the head bassist is happy, the singer is happy.
Yeah.
So I find it very challenging.
Yeah.
So yeah, I enjoyed switching to another format. But I
Yeah.
think you can hear that I have this weird, I think the way I create the tracks, especially in the early days, it sounds more like a rock song in a way. Like you have an intro, you have chorus, verse, except there's no singing. And so I put
Yeah.
samples instead of singing.
Yeah.
But that's a kind of structure that is kind of similar to a rock or punk song to some extent.
Yeah. And I guess over the years you've been able to kind of let go of that structure
Yeah.
and really explore. What do you think you explored with the most in 2024?
So in 2024, I think what I did differently was try to let go of some of the approaches I developed even for Weekly Beats.
Okay.
For me, it was in Weekly Beats to get in and start my DAW and start to write a bass line and start, duplicating things here and there
Yeah.
against the grid with a structure and based really on bass and drums. But this year, I would pull my little synthesizer and like cut off the metronome and just start recording like weird pads and stuff like that
Yeah.
that are not aligned to anything, and just let them breathe.
Yeah.
And I did that on a few tracks, like Asleep, Rivers of Blood. I think there's a Dimensional Strike. I like that as well. Like
Yeah.
they are much more moody, much more inspired by. There's a weekly beater. I don't know if that's a good word.
Yeah, man, yeah.
Weekly, a person on weekly beats who
Yes,
goes by
yes.
he goes by the name of R Domain. And I don't know if you've ever listened to R Domain music. R Domain
I don't know that I have. I'm putting it on my list.
is a great musician. He's from Australia, and he has those. Usually, it's live performance using synthesizers and sometimes guitars, and it's really really cool, really inspiring. And I love the way he makes his tracks breathe and really evolve naturally. And I think I was really interested in trying to explore that kind of approach. So that's something I tried. And also, there's another guy that I listen to a lot on Weekly Beats. Probably, to be honest, I think is one of my favorite, or if not my favorite person on Weekly Beats. It's called Q Roche.
Oh, I love Q
Q
Rush.
Roche is like not just the music, by the way. The whole experience, the whole way he sings is a great guy. Apparently, I
Yeah.
don't know him personally, but and he's got this sense of texture and pace to it. Like it's not like a straight song to read. It breathes, and I really love that.
Yeah.
So I try to experiment with that kind of stuff with my own way.
Awesome. Yeah, I just looked and our domain, I've got a bunch of tracks that I commented on and favorited from him. So I definitely know him, but need to go back and revisit, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's great. There's so many great people, to be honest.
Oh, so many. That's why I'm doing this podcast. So I can learn and everyone else can learn. And yeah, I think I struggle with what structure to keep for a song. Like I definitely had some weeks where I was like, Hello, everyone. This is a weird structure. Like, is it a chorus? Is it a bridge? Is it like who knows what? It's a bunch of stuff slapped together. Here it goes. I still haven't gotten to the point where I can make the really cool atmospheric let go of the structure and just go with the sounds. So maybe that's a challenge for me next weekly beats.
Uh, I think that's one of the challenges in weekly beats also is that it's easy to become formulaic, especially when
Mm-hmm.
you don't have time. Like I've done that a lot of time. Usually when I say I did a speed trash, that's what I mean. Is that oh,
Yeah.
okay? Let me get into it. Let me put a bass. Let me put
Yeah.
some kind of break beats. Let me put some harps. Add some ketchup. Put it in the fridge, and then
Yeah.
in 1 hour I can eat that.
Like, yeah.
Exactly.
Wipe your hands. You're done.
Where you feel like okay, and that goes back also to something about what makes a good track for you and for the audience. Some people might enjoy the result, right? Like musically it might be actually not so bad from a musical point of view, but I think what's more interesting for me is that what the thing that I'm chasing is the excitement when you make a track, when you
Yeah.
like you feel it's pulling you in a direction and you're just surfing the wave of the track,
Yeah.
and you're not like directing it. It's taking you somewhere and you just like barely letting it progress. Basically that's really the thing that I'm trying to chase and to succeed in having, so that experience is a
The
more
unexpected.
interesting. Yeah, but also to get the tracks to develop. There's some stupid tracks. I make a lot of stupid tracks, especially when with zombies and chainsaws. And sometimes I'm in front of my screen and stupidly giggling, like that's dumb. I love it.
Having a great time.
Let me put a chainsaw in there, and and that's fun. That's part of the thing that is actually
Yeah.
the result. Musically might not be so interesting, but I don't know fun doing it, and that's cool.
I love the zombie track, by the way. It almost made my picks today,
Yeah,
but
it's okay.
what synth do you use, by the way?
So everything I do is I do on FL Studio. So
Okay.
I would use the synths that are in FL Studio plus some external synths. So I use. I don't know. Have you ever used FL Studio?
I have not.
Okay.
I primarily use the M8, and I
Oh yeah,
just
cool.
I just got a Digitone too that I'm learning.
Oh, that's really cool. No, yeah, no, I've been using only FL Studio, and there's really good synths in there. There's ones called Flex, and another one called Citrus with a S, and there's a lot of variety of sounds. I'm not good at programming the, like turning the knobs and everything. I just use presets and samples,
Got it.
and I'm happy with that. There was a person on Weekly Beats. She's called iPagost. She used to do it until 2022, like the ultimate master of Citrus, just making tracks only using Citrus. And that's like the
Wow.
super impressive to listen to her work. But going back, so I use just those synths that are in FL Studio, Flex, Citrus. Sometimes use Massive from Native Instruments, and a few old FL Studio synths like Toxic Biohazard and Hammerless and Sakura, those kind of stuff. So,
Nice.
very easy. I'm not the kind of person who's gonna go and tweak all the presets. It's
Even when you're doing these like atmospheric tracks, you're not doing true like sound design. You're just like, yeah, that sounds good. I'm gonna work with that.
yeah, I'm doing.
Ah,
That
that's
sounds good.
that's great.
There's oh yeah, in Contact there are a lot of libraries called Straylight, Farlight, Evolve. And in Contact 7, they changed the interface a lot. I found that actually a lot of tracks are linked to the fact that they change the interface. And it makes super easy to explore the different presets. And that's what I would do. Like I open Native Instrument, I open Contact 7, Farlight, and I start, clicking the presets to listen to what they
Nice.
sound like. And there's one track that one preset that will call you. It calls to you.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
click this one and then I go and I tap on my keyboard, like, the silly meme of the cat on the keyboard. That's me on
Yeah. Yeah.
that's me on the synth. And yeah, if I like it, it might call for other sounds. It might call for, oh, now I need some kind of
Right.
weird violin somewhere, and I'm gonna find it on Farlight and Evolve. And usually for me, it's the most exciting part of the creative process, like trying to explore the sound and they call each other and, you just follow
Yeah.
the line.
And that's more of how it develops of like, oh, I really like this. This pairs well with this sound, like
Yeah, yeah,
how it
exactly.
evolves.
Like that big warm texture. Maybe I need to put something that contrasts a lot with that, like a koto
Yeah.
sound, like very sharp and percussive. So
Or an
it's
arpeggio.
an arpeggio. Yeah,
But you use a lot of samples too.
I use a lot of samples. I'm probably the main source of revenue for Splice.
All right, all right. I was gonna ask where you got them from.
So
Splice it
Splice,
is.
yeah, Splice. Yeah, a lot of samples for a lot of sounds, from animal sounds, car sounds, a lot of drums. Yeah, and a lot of glitch sounds as well. Yes,
So you don't program any drums. They're all
it's rare. It's
samples or
rare that
breaks. Okay.
it's one of the things I'm trying to do actually in 2025. I've been
Okay.
trying to go more into programming the drums instead of using the loops as they are. But yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I would say just your use of the loops. Like we spoke briefly on Discord before we recorded this, but I had asked you like, "Are you a drummer?" And you're like, "No, they're all loops, man." And I was like, I don't even know that if I had all these loops that I could put them together the way you do.
yeah, I feel more like a curator than than really making the drum loops. But and that's one of the things I love to. That's one of the challenge where when there's so many good loops that for me, coming from a level where I'm not very good at programming drums, like it's gonna take me a lot of work to get even 50% of the way. So it's like, oh, you know what? Especially for this week, let me just drop a loop in there, and it's gonna sound
Yeah.
great, and the EQ equalization will be great, and there's a lot of accent that are interesting in there. So
Yeah.
it makes it very tempting.
Yeah, I mean, there's the you only have so much time to put out a track,
That's right.
and like you said, if you're building all the drums yourself versus like I know I'm really good at curating these drum loops and putting them together in really interesting ways, like it works.
That's true. And then maybe also in weekly bits, it's really about making the MVP, like minimal viable product for your
Yeah.
for your track.
Mhm.
Like just make something that kind of works, and then you can
Yeah.
always iterate later and add stuff and maybe clean up the tracks, the drums, and make them yourself. Maybe.
Yeah,
Uh,
if miraculously you come back, like, a year later and you're like, "I actually like that song still."
yeah, no, and which has happened by the way. I've done that,
Yeah,
going
yeah.
back and recutting them and improving them. So
Okay, so you do go back and
sometimes, yeah,
tweak some.
sometimes.
Even with still a weekly cadence, you find some time to go back and,
Oh,
tweak
good.
some old ones?
I think I cheated a little. I think there was a track in earlier in the year. What's the name of the track? Oort Cloud or something like that. Going through the Oort Cloud, and it was a track where I think I had a couple of the melodies back in 2024 that I had released at Weekly Streak. And I remember not thinking much about them. And then I was listening to them maybe a couple of months later and thinking, oh, whoa, hold on a second. I don't remember recording that, but that's cool.
Yeah, I
But
like
but
that.
but I don't like how it sounds as it is, but I like the ideas, and it was starting
Got
to call
it.
me for other ideas. So I took some of that and changed it and reorganized it and made a track that I actually liked versus this
That's
track
cool.
that I barely remember, but that had interesting gold nuggets in there.
Yeah, like you're curating from your past work, but, like, stealing some of the ideas and being like, I know what to do with this now."
Yeah, no, it's weird. And some tracks that didn't resonate at all with me in the past, and maybe I was comparing them with like this ideal version of the track that I in my head. But at some point later, you forget about this ideal version and just listen to the track for what it is. And
That's
you
a
might get
really good
surprised.
point.
Might get surprised actually both ways. Sometimes there's track like, hey, that track was good, and I listen to it again, and what
Dude.
was I thinking?
I think that's, like, the number one reason that I didn't really release much before Weekly Beats is because you work on something and then the next day you're like, yeah, I don't like that at all. Like, I really liked it yesterday, but what happened?"
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah, it's just weird, and I think, Rick Rubin talks about this in the book of like that's why you got to just like let things go before you either overthink it or like try to make it into some ideal thing that it will never be.
right? And I don't know if you've heard that the story about Prince recording "When Doves Cry."
No.
He did the whole session and he added a lot of instruments, and it was this huge piece with a lot of instruments, and it didn't work. And at the
Mm.
end, he's like, "Okay, let me remove stuff," and he starts removing stuff. He ended up removing the bass even, and that's what got released. It's just perfect after removing all the crap. I was like, okay, now that's perfect.
Yeah, yeah, ruthless delete.
Yeah, exactly. But you can only do that if you are totally free with the track.
Yeah. Yeah, not trying to have it live up to some expectation.
Yeah. Or to some standard format of, oh, I need to have a bass, or I need to have that kind of structure, or I need to have a guitar solo.
Needs
No,
to
no,
have a
just
bridge.
recognize what the song is calling for and just follow it.
What do you do for guitar?
What do you mean? What I do
Do you
for
have a like a DI box or is that FL Studio?
Yeah, I plug directly into Focusrite. I plug one of my guitars, like I have an Explorer here,
Nice.
and usually I record the track using one of those, you know, like
Like a
guitar
virtual
rig.
amp.
Exactly, virtual amp. That's what I use, virtual amps.
Okay.
And sometimes I will play around with presets a little. That's again that might call for a track. That might just noodling a little, and you end up on a weird sound that will inspire you to do something
Yeah.
else. So that's helpful. But usually I just go for distortion and record a riff and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, man. I was hoping you were gonna give me all sorts of cool new equipment to buy, but I guess now I just need to buy FL Studio.
I'm super, I'm super simple.
Because I was like, man, these like the synths sound so great. The guitar sounds amazing. Like, tell me some cool stuff to go buy.
Yeah, guitar. No, just plug your guitar in.
Get it?
Yeah, you get a dog. Get a Native Instruments. I think it's Guitar Rig from Native Instruments in there by default,
Dang,
and
dang.
it sounds great, and I'm happy with it.
No, it does sound great.
But interestingly, those guitars, if you listen to them alone, they sound like crap alone.
It's the whole mix that
It's a
makes it.
whole mix, and I think that's something I developed really by doing a lot of tracks along the years, is the ear and how something should be sounding within the mix instead of sounding.
Yeah,
I mean, I think I heard on other podcasts that you were also a guitar player, and guitar
yeah,
players, we're just narcissistic and we only care about the guitar sound, and we've been trained to be in our living room or in our bedroom, plugging our very nice pedals and everything and making sure everything
yeah,
sounds great on our
yeah,
own. But when you get into a band, you start, there's a singer, that's the annoying person that's running around with a mic. There is a bass player that nobody wants to listen to anywhere, thinks the bassist, thinks the guitarist. And so, but when you do a lot of tracks and you mix them, you end up realizing like, yeah, guitar is nice, but just stay in your track, stay in your
yeah,
frequencies, and you end up optimizing really the sound for that. Even when choosing the presets, you start developing an ear for, okay, that preset sounds like an old man having a hiss or coughing wildly. That's exactly what I need for this track. Frequency wise, that's perfect.
So, do you do a lot of per track EQing for your mix? Because your your mixes sound full, but like everything's in its place. There's not too much reverb. I don't know. They just sound so clean and great. I was like, I gotta ask him about his mixing process.
You'll get very disappointed. I'm very,
I just
I'm
click
a
a
very
button in
simple.
FL Studio.
Well, yeah, to some extent. I think most of the work comes from choosing the right sounds. Like
Got it.
I do some equalization, like especially I'll scoop the mids in a lot of stuff when you start adding layers and it starts sounding muddy. So you become like
Mm-hmm.
very much like, okay, let me cut the meats in a lot of that stuff, and
Let it
we'll
breathe.
include guitars. But usually it's also about the sound selection when you start with your bass sounds that really sit in their lane, and also
Yeah.
the drums that sit in their lane. And since a lot of arpeggios that I use, you will notice they are high. They are all
Yeah.
for that high space.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy to just first separate it by instrument and try to give space to a lot of stuff. And then if really it starts to get a little muddy, then go for the equalization. And then
Yeah.
just put compression on top of it. And usually it works for me at least.
Yeah. And you're, as you're building these tracks, doing sound selection and kind of hearing how it sounds all together
Yeah.
and being like, that one's not right. Let me go dig through some more presets or.
Yeah. And I'll do that a lot actually for I'll usually play the track, put the section for instance the bass or an harp, and I'll play it against the track, and I'll try to start playing different presets for it. Because some
Yeah.
sounds I'll be
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I love that, and I put it in the track, and like can't really hear it, or it doesn't add
Yeah.
much, or it just muddies it up. And there are sounds that I wouldn't really like actually, but you put them against the mix and it just fits perfectly, or it
Yeah.
complements. It's sometimes you have multiple basses that you don't really like independently, but when you mix them, it's going to take maybe the first aspect of one and the deep impact of another one to build this own new sound. And I think you can't really, well, at least I can't really imagine it until I tried a lot of stuff and
Yeah.
discover them along the way. So yeah,
Yeah.
playing those things and selecting the tracks, the sounds as I go through the tracks has been very helpful too. So that I don't need to do equalization because actually I choose by default the ones that fit, right?
Right. And that's kind of how I approach instruments and sound design on the M8 because I'll listen to it and I end up going and doing more sound design than I typically do to get it to sit right.
Right, right. Yeah, that's an interesting approach, right? Because it makes you again very different from when you play in a band.
Oh yeah, yeah. And like you said, trying to take a band and put it on a recording is
Yes.
now
Stuff,
you're
right?
trying to get your guitarist, hey, actually change your tone that you normally use because it doesn't really sit in the mix right.
Yeah.
And uh, it's a different arena to play
Yeah.
in.
And if you're in a band, it's like, what do you mean change my tone? No, no, you change your tone.
No, I've been using this our entire tour.
Don't understand. That's my sound. But this pedal cost $500. You think I'm gonna cut it off?
Yeah, exactly. Um, what what's kind of the biggest thing that you've learned, whether it's production or mentality for 2024?
I don't know. For me, it's always a work in progress. So
Yeah,
I don't think that apart from what I discussed earlier about trying to let go of and just
yeah,
experiment more, I don't think I learned something new fundamentally. And just yeah, it's just about keep going, keep going, keep going. So
yeah,
one thing I want to improve for next time for 2026 will be to allocate more time to listen to more tracks from other
yeah,
people. But now, apart from that, 2024 was I would say more of the same and still improving a little. You keep that's the thing I've learned about through the years when I listen back to the old tracks from 2020 is the yeah, the mix was raw. You can hear, and at the time I couldn't hear it. I couldn't hear
yeah,
that some of the mixes were not so great. But you develop an ear, right? And you start hearing things a bit better. So it's good to go back sometimes and feel the progress, even though you might not notice it week over week.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the old practice makes perfect,
Yeah,
and the more experience you have, the better your ears get on learning, what you like or what sounds good, or even listen to other people's stuff and being like, I want to mix like that.
yeah, no, absolutely. But there's a negative effect to that. There's stuff that you used to be happy with that you're no longer happy with because you've developed it more and you are able to be more, I would say, insightful, but also, I guess, pickier.
Oh
becomes like
yeah, yeah,
it becomes
yeah.
harder to be satisfied by your own mix or stuff like that.
That's true. Well, should we get into the music?
Yeah, sure.
All right, I'm gonna start with Rivers of Blood. All right, I'm gonna cue it up and we'll come back. All right, so that was Rivers of Blood. The first thing I'll say is creepy as hell. Tell
Thank
me
you.
more about it.
Yeah. So I was reading this book that week. I remember reading it. It's called a book called 1Q84. I think in English it's from Murakami, who's a Japanese author, a Japanese writer. And in that book, there's a sequence where I'm not gonna give spoilers, but you have a character that is very stoic, but you know he's got a very dark past.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I'll describe it will make it sound not very interesting, a bit truthful. But if you read it, you will understand. Basically, he had a dog that he loved a lot, and the dog was hurt in a very, very bad way, and he really didn't like that. But he doesn't express it, but you feel it bubbling inside. Like you feel
Mm,
that, like the waves are coming in, and something's starting to break in his mind. And I love that feeling, like that dark, ominous feeling, the anger. But that's not like in your face. It bubbles like you have the
yeah.
unconscious that's starting to get really crazy. And I wanted to capture that vibe, the vibe of like,
Wow.
it's taking you over, like
Yeah.
big waves, dark waves, undercurrents under the ocean start taking him, and you have those weird violin strings and those weird piano lines that indicate like it's starting to
Yeah.
break a little in his head. That's
Yeah,
the
and the
vibe I wanted to go for.
violins almost sound like screams or I don't know. Like it just like you said, it like builds it's this under the surface thing that builds into these like very uncomfortable moments.
Yeah. uh, David Lynch passed away a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
And there was this movie called Lost Highway in there. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie.
I have not.
So very dark movie, very weird. I mean, it's David Lynch, right? But like really weird, really weird and creepy. And I remember there's scenes in there that have those weird nightmare quality. And there's a free jazz playing. The main character is actually a saxophonist in a free jazz band. And there's this mix of free jazz and weird dark music made by, I think it's Angelo Badalamenti and also Barry Adamson and Trent Reznor working on those tracks. And
All
it's
right.
just very dark and very weird. And there's something there that I wanted to try to recapture a little. And that's one of those things I think for my tracks. You mentioned earlier also cinematographic is usually I visualize a track. Like I'm a very visual person when I hear music. Like some people when they hear a track they will visualize a band playing. I don't. For me, when I hear a track, it takes me somewhere. It's gonna
It's like
take
a
me into.
scene.
It's like a scene, yeah.
Yeah.
And it works both ways. If I see a scene in a movie, it can bring music in the head, so which is
Yeah.
convenient. And so that's the thing. Like I could see this scene in a book, and it starts calling those weird sounds and this
Got
weird
it.
music.
That's really cool because one of your other songs that we'll get to, I wrote a note that it was like it feels like different scenes in this adventure.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes when I actually do it, it's gonna be like that. It's gonna be, oh yeah, and then the person does that and this, and then they
Yeah.
run down the corridor, and all those kind of
Yeah.
things.
Wow. That I mean, that makes a lot of sense and it definitely comes out in your music and that's a really cool way of writing music that I don't have that same ability, but man, that was creepy. Success. What made that one of your top 3 picks?
I think the the process for me, this one again, I said, yeah, it's okay, it's easy to get rid of. You do a track every week, so you don't feel attached. It's kind of true, but not totally true. Especially when I do the weekly beats, because a lot of people, listen to your tracks and you like the comments, and there's always something in your head that
Yeah.
says, maybe I should do like a break beats and harp, just kind of thing, right? And so like, no, 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 I need to go. I need to start pushing things and make myself
Yeah.
uncomfortable. Try something different. I mentioned our domain music, and I said I need to try something like that. So let
Yeah.
me let me get rid of everything and let me get into that. And I think that was the first track, or maybe the second track in the year where I tried to do that, and I was kind of happy with the result. Musically wise, maybe a lot of people would listen to it and say, "Ugh, I'm not sure I want to listen to that," which is cool. But on my end, it was more like, wow, that's refreshing, that's different, and I kind of worked.
Yeah.
That kind of worked. That kind of I kind of enjoyed it, and in many ways, it was like more closely plugged directly into the subconscious. Like it calls me when I
Yeah.
listen to this track, it pulls me into this weird dark zone more than a lot
Yeah.
of tracks where I put breakbeats and stuff like that.
So it's one of your favorites because it really you really pushed out of your normal zone and it feels much more like you.
Yeah. That's right. A bit more honest. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that makes a lot of sense just hearing about how you sort of visualize music and scenes, and you're reading this book waiting for the dentist, and you've got your own anxiety plus the book, and just how you were able to capture that and put it into music that would go perfectly with a reenactment of that scene is like brilliant.
Thank you very much. Makes me think that maybe I should have captured the sound of the dentist drill and to replace
Yeah, I
the
mean,
high violin string at the beginning.
there's always time to rework it.
That's a new idea for a track. I need to write it down.
All right, we're gonna move onward to Sleeping Dragons. Here we go.
Suspect is armed. Officers in need of assistance.
Your kung fu is pretty good.
You're good. But will you be strong enough?
This is like a different version of a film score.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. It's one where you get pulled in by a lot of different inspirations again, and it's interesting how it fits. There's a feedback loop, right? Like I think I don't remember how it started. I think I wanted to do something like there's some video games about China, martial arts, and stuff like that. And I was trying to play it with it a little. And I think I got the introduction with the koto, and then kind of liked it, and I kind of added some kung fu samples, like fighting samples, and then it gives me this idea of, oh yeah, maybe there's a police thing happening there, so I start adding police car sound, and then I said, oh yeah, but then they must be chasing each other, so putting footsteps
Yeah.
in there, and then starting to add other stuff to make it work, right? And there is what I liked in this track, what I enjoyed doing in this track is, one, I was working on sound design, horns and brass. I really like horns, like trumpets and saxophones, but I find it very hard for me to compose properly or to mix properly, because I don't play saxophone or anything like that.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've put some time in trying to create a lot of tracks in the past with that. And you can hear, progress. And this time I liked it because it sounds kind of good. Like, I think or at least for me, the
Yeah,
horns
it
sound
sounds
kind of good.
great.
And I like the mix where I was able to make it sound a bit like 70s track, right? Like the
Yeah.
horns sound a bit, they're a bit, to compress or overdriven. That was on purpose, actually. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and for the vibe, because I wanted this 70s, like kung fu police movie
Yeah.
vibe of it, right? And
Well,
there's also,
the
go on, sorry.
when the horns kick in, it like just takes the track to a whole other level. Like it's like, oh, like I feel like I'm in this chase, and then you've got all these like sample imagery things going on that it's like another level of imagery compared to the one we just listened to, Rivers of Blood.
Yep.
It's like that's got more of a subtle abstract imagery, and the imagery is a little bit more in your face, but like it really sets these different scenes. Like when it's just like rain, it's like, oh, he's like waiting, hiding out, like waiting for the police to go by, sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's a feedback loop when you listen. At least for a person like me who tends to visualize track, so the music starts, and you might be inspired and start thinking of a scene because of the music, and then if samples come in, it's like they pull you and
Yeah.
directly into that direction. So you're slowly, it's like little hints, or maybe it's like a glowing arrow in the dark saying, hey, that's where you go. And you
Yeah.
can go with the flow of the music and the visualization. So it's yeah, that's how these kind of tracks develop. Also, there's a soundtrack for an anime called Cowboy Bebop. Cowboy
Mm-hmm.
Bebop is like an anime of the 90s, where it's the music is really great. The music is really great, like a lot of jazz, a lot of very weird experimentation. And there's a title track that has both horns and very very cool hand drums. And I think in this track you can hear a lot of hand drums. And I was trying to
Yeah.
recapture that vibe of the excitement
Got
that
it.
comes with hand drums, and the special energy that comes with it. So
Yeah, it does take the energy up another level.
yeah. So I was happy with this track from that point of view. I think it feels complete in a way.
Yeah, and what makes this one of your favorites?
I think so. I had to try to pick three tracks, right? So I said, okay, let me try to pick three tracks that are very different, but kind of represent one side
Yeah.
of the way I do the tracks. And I think this one is more the more traditional, put a lot of samples to really paint a scene from that aspect, and also the horns thing. I think I was happy, and yeah, kind of like that
Yeah.
track. So
Yeah, and then like when the horns come back in, it's sort of like takes the whole track full circle.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I
Also a
thought the
lot.
horns sounded great and definitely 70s.
Yeah, but thanks for that. I was really trying to go for that. Another thing that I was trying for that kind of track that I developed more in, I want to say 2021, which is dynamics. Like, get it very high, and
Yeah.
to make those sections really pop, you need to get the rest very low. You need to
Yeah.
bring those times where I think there's a section in the middle, right, where it's low. It's basically just rain and
Yeah, and some
and a
like
sample.
footsteps
Yeah,
and
exactly. And if you
yeah.
bring it there, it allows you to go back up, because if it's
Yeah.
always super high, then everything ends up being flat.
No, just different scenes and the dynamic range plays into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really cool. The other one that this reminds me of is, I'm gonna mess up the name. It's the Two Brothers, or
Yeah.
Brothers and Bullets.
Yes.
Brothers and Bullets.
Yeah, very similar track. Actually. From a very similar vibe. I've been playing Sleeping Dogs. It's a game 20 or not 12 years ago, I think, which is a game that's based in Hong Kong, where you play this undercover agent. And it has all this like dark John Woo vibe, and it has the
Yeah.
Hong Kong vibe, the rain. So I think when you play that kind
Yeah.
of game, after that you go back to your door and like, okay, let me capture that.
Definitely influences your imagery for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, cool. We're gonna move on to the Machine God. I really love that last like 45 seconds of how it builds, and then you've got these like higher pitched synths that kind of have like this long delay tail.
Oh, yep. That's one of my go-to things on Flex. I think it's called a Speed Bike Escape. I love it because it's a pain to play this one. It's super sensitive to the dynamics of how you play, and it
Oh,
feels
okay.
like you're riding a wild Mustang or a
Mhm.
horse that has not been broken yet, and you're like, you're never sure how the scene's gonna behave, and you might just go and run away, and you have to kind of try to tame it. I love this
Yeah.
sound, and it's got like this aggressive fuzz quality, and it breathes and lives. So yeah, it's a cool synth to play with. I use it
Yeah.
quite a lot actually.
I definitely get that feeling listening to those synths that they're, like, a little hard to control.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
confirm.
it's like, like, starts to take off.
Exactly. And sometimes you have to make a few adjustments because sometimes it will just go in weird, wild directions, which is cool. It's part of the
Yeah,
fun.
I mean, more unexpected results.
Yeah, I get
I
surprised.
like the breathing that is kind of another, I guess, maybe signature creepy element that's, like, just under the surface, uh, and almost a bit rhythmic,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
and the Gregorian chants.
might have changed the tempo on the gas mask. So it's a gas mask sample.
Okay.
I like it's. I like it when I hear that kind of sound, the gas mask thing, because it takes you back into human, like a person. It's as if you have this
Yeah.
big scene, but if it were a movie, you go back and do like a close up of the person, right? Because you can
Yeah.
hear their breath, so you're next to them. And it sense if you saw something big next to it and you go back to the person, you feel the scale. So
You were
it's
so visual.
I'm totally visual.
It's awesome, because like, that's not what I immediately go to, but it's really cool to hear that part of your creative process.
Yeah, and Gregorian chants is because I bought this expensive library a few years ago, so I need to use it.
What made this, one of your top picks?
I think that's one, maybe another example of another type of tracks I usually do. It has harps. It has the cyberpunk kind of drum, like strict, but works well. It's very cinematic also in its own way. The Gregorian chants take it to a more like I want to say science fiction, but dark, grim kind of science fiction.
Yeah, yeah,
And so yeah, and the example of this the high synths at the end, things typical of what I do. And there's also this break with the guitar,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is a program guitar. I don't play acoustic guitar that well, so whenever you hear that kind of lines, it's usually me programming a guitar. That's easier for me. But yeah, that's more representative of a lot of tracks I've done. Also, a lot of glitches that I
Yeah,
use,
yeah,
and a lot of reverses as well.
I like the glitch edition. That's not something I ever think about adding into my music.
Actually, those samples and glitch. When I started Weekly Beats, I never did that. Well, no, that's actually not true. But I usually not didn't do that much. But I remember one of the first tracks I did with Weekly Beats, coming again from rock and punk, is I'm not a good singer, so I don't never sing on tracks. But when you record a whole track, you like it misses something. Like actually, the weird guy that was running around in the studio, and I kept trying to take it from fumbling with my cables. It's actually useful. The singer is actually useful.
I can
Eh,
use that
I
instead of
could use that,
singing.
and yeah, I couldn't. So I couldn't get a singer, but I could put samples. That's why I ended up using a lot of samples. I would put
Got it.
samples where instead you would have a singer to try to fill the thing. And yeah, I ended up actually liking samples a lot and trying to use them more.
You are the master of sample curation.
Well, yeah, Splice revenues. That's me.
Number one Splice revenue supporter.
Exactly.
Cool. We'll move on to my picks. The first one I'm going to play is Subliminal. All right, so I think this one was pushed over the edge for one of my picks because it was inspired by some M8 stuff in Shibuya.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there was this cool live event in Shibuya for M8 community in Japan, but it ended up being, I think, more than half of the people who played there were people from Weekly Beats.
Wow,
That
okay.
either 2024 or previous years, like there was Tobokegao, uh, there was Brightface, Azuria Sky, Uraboroshi. So you get a lot of people. So super cool events because one, get to meet other Weekly Beats. They actually exist. And not just a figment of my
Weird.
my realities. Like I was
We're
like,
not
wow,
all AI.
you guys are humans. That's cool. And also you could see, especially M8. I don't use the M8, so I tried to buy one, but it was sold out. But what I liked is that you get for the same machine, so you have this constraint of everybody's using the same machine. But live,
Yeah,
everybody sounded so different and so themselves that it was
that's
super
really cool.
inspiring, super exciting to see, like, how people coming. There was one guy, I think Uraboroshi, seems to be coming more from maybe a jazz, maybe even classical vibe, and he would really put that into his music. Of course, Trash 80 at the end, he did the main, the
Yeah,
final act, and he had that very, very powerful sound. So it was super interesting to see how people were approaching the tracks in very different ways, but using all the M8. So inspiring. I don't
that's
have an
really
M8, so I
cool.
couldn't do a M8 track, but uh,
But it
went to the
obviously inspired you this week or that particular week for this track.
yeah, absolutely. To use more maybe ARPs and stuff like that, which is always fun.
Yeah, I love the sound design and there's some doubled synth lines over that little bit slower bass,
Yeah,
and you can't really go wrong with ARPs.
yeah,
So
yeah. I cannot disagree with that. So it
I know
usually,
you're a big fan.
yeah, feels like cheating sometimes a little, to be honest. Because the way I would do it is, I imagine that you have a bass line with, I don't know, a simple chord progression. You have 4 chords, right? Then I would put like a piano on top of it. So just the same, but it's chords. So instead
Yeah,
of just the fundamental, the root note. And then to make it interesting, then I'll start playing with harps. To make this boring 4 chord progression exciting, you just play around
right.
with harps. So it feels like kind of cheating, but kind of works. That's okay. Track is a track.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta get it done.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm sure today is going to be the same thing. I need to get a track out, so I'll go for the harps.
Well, my next one, I was kind of trying to pick some different variations, kind of like you were. Uh, the next one is Death Roll.
Oh,
We'll come
wow.
back.
That's a very different one. Yeah.
All right, so when I was picking my songs, I was like, I gotta have something with guitar. And this is another just imagery filled, high energy. Like, it takes you on an adventure through the jungle where you're about to get eaten by crocodiles.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is a interesting experience, but you can have it only once in a lifetime by definition. And I think I was listening to a podcast from this guy called Paul Rosoli. He's a guy who's an American who's now protecting the Amazonian rainforest. So he lives in the rainforest, and he was talking about rainforest and how beautiful it is, but also brutal it is. I think he was saying nature is metal, like it's all about and death. And just the imagery of the rainforest, about those large caiman, and the thing about sex and death, which I used in the end, right? Like there's all those AI voices
Yeah.
singing sex and death. I thought, that's awesome. So, and I thought the caiman attacking you underwater, like the first section when the person is, you have the percussion and everything, you feel, oh, the nature is beautiful, but you fall into the river, and then you get from the viewpoint of the caiman, and this metal guitar, metal guitar attack thing is, yeah, I think was appropriate for sex and death and nature is metal kind of vibe.
Very intense. Very
Yeah,
intense.
yeah. Interestingly, that's kind of, if you wanted a hint of the kind of music I used to play, that's the kind of music I used to play, like
Got it. Got it.
metal, punk, hardcore kind of thing.
Yeah. I was like, I gotta play this one to sort of showcase all of your different variations of tracks you make.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that was another. It's a bit in your face, but it works too.
And just so many different samples.
Yeah, again, a lot of hand percussions,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it works well, right? Especially with different sounds. Like you can get a lot of variations between heavy guitar and nature sounds. The wide palette can make it interesting. It makes each
Yeah.
element more interesting because they contrast against each other.
Yeah. I love this track. I mean, there are a lot of tracks that I was like, should I break the format and play like just like one extra? And I was like, I was like, I can't do that so
Can't
early in
can't
the
can't
year.
do that. Can't do that.
um, well, cool. I've got one last song, which is actually the last song of 2024, Night Sky. Music is like, it starts out with like ambient cinematic, and then it comes in with this like really nasty, gritty bass. And then you kind of go into your more traditional song format that you use in a lot more songs.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the second half, or at least after the intro, is definitely more, say, similar to a track we listened earlier, like Machine God, right? It sounds more traditional, big drums and harps. But the intro is very much something I developed this year with, we had the example of Rivers of Blood, where it's really going to those big, dark synth sounds, like really building and drawing you
Yeah.
in. And so I think that was a learning experience, and also playing more than programming. Like even on the main riff, using a synthesizer where I actually was playing with the dynamics, and capturing something that's not perfect but kind of feels good.
Yeah.
So
More
it's
human
maybe
like.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
especially in this. I think that's what, yeah, maybe that's going back to an earlier question you had about changing the approach. Something that I maybe didn't realize, but starting to mix those genres and playing more is maybe what's gonna happen more in 2025 and 2026.
Yeah. Is that kind of going to be more of your focus in 2026? Like more live playing, more ambient kind of stuff? Or.
Yeah, actually, I was talking about trying to be better at drums. Actually, I went just a couple of weeks ago to try to learn to
Oh,
learn
okay.
drums. So I'm thinking of taking maybe drum lessons, not to become a good drummer, but just to
But to just
give
like understand
and
this is
feel
what
it.
drumming is.
Yeah, and exactly. And I was talking with the drum teacher, and I was talking about the, what I want is to understand the dynamics, what a drummer would do, what a drummer wouldn't do, but also to use it from a music creation point of view. And he was very good at answering that question by saying, look at, he plays the same thing, but then he moves the accent, or he puts the snare, instead of putting it, the snare on the 3, he puts it on the 2. And he was giving me just like listening to him playing, I was like, oh, that's cool, I need to do that. And so, yeah, I was thinking maybe if I take some drum lessons, I will at least, add to expand my vocabulary, because right now my
Yeah.
vocabulary is kind of limited by whatever sample I will be using, and I don't really
Right.
use it necessarily in a very developed way, right? Versus if I have the vocabulary, if I understand more of the drums, I might be about more specific and maybe change the vibe and say like create a sense of unease with a weird pattern. So
Yeah.
I think learning an instrument is always helpful.
Like, approach it from this song, instead of this song fits with the sample, to like, I really wish this sample was like this for this song.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. To be able to be a bit more better at curation, or maybe slicing the sample in a way that will make it even more interesting.
So, how does learning drums fit in with this sort of, like we started at the top of the show, like this ambient scene setting sort of thing that you were like, this really feels like me, but there's not really any drums in it?
That's a good question. I think there's many me's. So there is a me where I want the big dark cinematic vibe,
Yeah.
like the not horror movie, but more David Lynch kind of vibe of
Yeah.
movies, where like soundtracks that usually don't have much beats, right? So
Yeah.
that's definitely one part. But another part is I love rock, I love electronic music, so that the beat becomes very interesting, and especially breakbeats. Really love breakbeats. So it's like you can love a good hamburger and a good sushi. They are very
Yeah.
different animals,
Yeah.
but I love both.
Yeah. And I almost put a breakbeat song in my picks because I was like, I mean, it's Kedbreak, so like it should have
Exactly.
a breakbeat in there.
A silly bit of information: the 136, it comes from the A main break, which is the ultimate break.
Okay. Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
BPM of the A main break is 136 BPM. That's where it comes from.
Got it. That makes total sense now on multiple levels.
So that's where it
Cool.
comes from. All right, that was cool.
Well, we're gonna finish it out with Night Sky. Really appreciate you coordinating US and Japan time zones to be on here. It was great to have you and ask you a bunch of questions and get to know your music a little bit more.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really appreciate that. Looking also forward to listening to other podcasts. Like there's so many cool people in the community I want to hear more from beyond just their music. I really want to hear more about their thought process. So really big fan. Continue, because it feels like even more work than making tracks every week and making a podcast every week. So good
Yeah,
luck with
it's
that.
it's a different kind of work, but I'm, you know, just like the weekly beats process, like you've got to do it in a way that it can actually be done efficiently. So that's kind of what I'm still trying to figure out right now, is like, how can I do this where it's efficient and it's like something that I can continue doing for the rest of the year. So I think I'm doing a pretty good job at being efficient at it so far, and I'm only going to get better. But weekly beats taught me that, like, okay, I can spend some creative time to crank something out. And now the music has taken a little bit of a back seat, but I'm still trying to not necessarily output music, but still do some more experimenting. Like, I'm trying to break a little bit more out of my box in preparation for 2026 weekly beats, so that I can, kind of like you were talking about, like just do something a little bit different and not worry so much about comments or what people might expect. Just like really branch out.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, best of luck to continue.
Well, thanks, man. And we're going to play it out with Night Sky, and you have a good one.
Thank you very much.